Can you hear me well? Yeah, so the video is a bit lagging behind, so I will try to be very quick. So I welcome you today at this very important and interesting conference, and particularly the session which is devoted to the international relations and how the world is facing all the challenges that we are having nowadays, including climate, this COVID-19 stuff, and whatever, not all the disasters that are coming. So all sort of challenges. And I hope this session will be extremely interesting and will create an opportunity for us to exchange views. And we have lots of speakers today covering economic, infrastructure, security issues, and we also have great experts participating today. Before we move to the session itself, a few logistic points I would like you to take into account. Please try to make sure that you are muted most of the time, and you get unmuted only when you have to speak or ask the question or comment. So that's why I'll ask you to keep your mics muted. So those who are not muted yet, please do so, because I mute you, but then you start unmuting. So please mute when others talk. So this is rule number 1. We will have the opportunity to ask questions, but we have 3 sessions, and we'll structure the session, the questions the way that you have a chart in your screen where you type your question. And after each session, we have 3 sub sessions. We will sum up and choose the best questions, and we'll ask the speakers to respond to them. We'll also have opportunity for our expert to reflect on some of the issues or ask the questions. But please type them. We will collect them, assess, and then we will post them. So this is number 1. I will be naming you and introducing you before you start sharing your screen and making the presentation. Olga, could you please mute, because too many participants and I can't find you in this session. So I suggest we start. So make sure that you are within the time allocated for your presentation. There shouldn't be more than 5 minutes to allow others to have enough time, and also have some time for questions and discussion. And now I would like to give the floor to our honorable expert, Tatiana Lanshina, our colleague from RUNEPA, and she's also the founder of the GNS network, and she will say a few words about herself, as well as give her perspective on how the world is changing, what the challenges are, and what is the future of the international relations. So I'm passing floor to Tatiana Lanshina, and Tatiana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yulia, for introduction, and hello, dear colleagues. I'm very glad to be with you today. And I was asked by the organizers to talk on how the COVID-19 crisis would affect international relations and sustainable development. I'm a senior researcher with RUNEPA, and I deal mainly with issues like energy transition and sustainable development. So now I will share my screen. Just a moment. So can you see the presentation now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, I want to talk on the unique characteristics of the current crisis, what makes it different from previous crises, and why it is expected that we will have very severe consequences for economic growth. So first of all, it was the first time when leaders actually decided that we should prioritize human life, and we should do some extraordinary things to save people who could suffer from COVID-19, and everybody understood that the consequences for economic growth would be great, and that we will have a very steep decline in our economies. And actually, this decision is very, very important for sustainable development, because sustainability combines economic growth with social issues and with environmental aspects. So social issues were this time prioritized, and this is very unusual. And actually, this crisis was man-made because there were no reasons for such event that we could have production stalled and people staying at home and trying to work online and so on. So it was just decided that we should have quarantine and self-isolate to save people and to reduce so that our healthcare system wouldn't collapse if too many people would need to go to hospitals. And so we decided that we need these strict measures, and this is the main reason for the economic crisis. What else makes it unique is that, as the United Nations noted, that it is a human crisis that calls for solidarity. So some countries, very different countries that are at different stages of economic development, that have different political regimes, they decided that we should have the similar measures in those countries, that we need to do the same things. And one more interesting fact is that actually this crisis might lead us to a different economy and to a different world, and it is up to the global leaders now to decide what this world will look like. So one option is to go back and try to find some solutions for countries on their own, without any huge international cooperation, and without trying to continue the transition towards sustainable development, and without trying to solve climate crisis and so on. So there might be some setbacks in this process. And the other option is to try to overcome the crisis with new measures and to try to develop in a sustainable manner. And in this case, we will need, of course, more international cooperation, and we will need countries to solve the problems together. So this new COVID-19 crisis and pandemic sets new global challenges for the world. So first of all, it might be the most severe economic crisis since the Second World War, and we do not know yet how severe it will be, because now we have the first outbreak, and experts say that we might have second outbreak like in autumn, and we haven't survived actually the first outbreak yet. We are just in the middle of it. So we see improvements in China, and people come back to their jobs, but in Europe the situation is much worse now, and we do not know what we will see in Russia in the coming months, because we are a bit behind the Europe. So pandemic started in Russia a bit later than in European countries. So we might see the peak of this crisis maybe in May or even in June. So we do not know all the consequences yet, and actually it might be that bad like the worst economic crisis since the Second World War. We have a lot of risks of slowdown in modern global processes. So what are the modern global processes actually? First of all, there are two key documents, global documents, that define the global development since 2015. Those documents are Agenda up to 2030, Agenda of Sustainable Development, that contains 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And the second document is Paris Agreement, Paris Climate Agreement, that was adopted in 2015 as well by members of UN. So we have to continue implementing those documents, and the United Nations have recently underlined that nothing changes with COVID-19 pandemic, and we still have those documents, and they still should be a priority. And we have a lot of problems with energy transition because some traditional energy sources are very environmentally unfriendly, and we have a lot of problems with environment in countries like China, India, and other countries that had huge economic growth in recent years, and now it is obvious that they should do something about their environment. So the energy transition could be slowed down as well, and we will have a lot of questions in this sphere in the coming years. Inequalities were exacerbated by the COVID-19 outbreak because people who work for small businesses and who are in the gray sector of economy, they were affected most. So they lost their jobs and they lost their salaries, and they will have the hardest time in the coming months and years. And one more thing is that we face a risk of disintegration nowadays. So as we saw, there were some conflicts within Europe. The United Kingdom, Great Britain has just exited the European Union, and now we have this COVID-19 outbreak, and southern countries that are more poor than the other countries in the European Union, they were affected by the COVID-19 outbreak most. And of course, they needed some help, some contributions from other countries, and not all the problems were solved in a good manner, and there are a lot of tensions between so-called poor South and wealthy North, so it might lead to some new tensions, and it might increase the risks of international disintegration. And of course, there will be a lot of fears in the coming months and the coming years in terms of cooperation, and of course, a lot of conferences are cancelled, and it will set back the process of international cooperation. So what can be done about the crisis? What international organizations say about it, and what do leaders think how we should deal with COVID-19 pandemic and its consequences? Many leaders have already expressed their views that we shouldn't deal with this crisis as usual. We should have non-traditional approaches. First of all, because it is a very unusual crisis. It is a unique crisis, a man-made crisis, or administrative crisis. You can call it as you want, but it is not like all our previous crises. So we should do something new, something unusual to cope with it. First of all, we should address the problems that were revealed by pandemic, like, of course, healthcare problems. So we have seen that many healthcare systems cannot survive a severe pandemic, and we should make them stronger. We should invest more money in healthcare. The second problem is inequalities, of course, and we have a lot of inequality problems, and this crisis might make them even worse because, as I said, the poor people will suffer most. And the third very important issue is human rights, and also some people who are not that wealthy and who cannot have so many opportunities like other people have. They suffer most from this crisis, and something should be done about this as well. What else is important to overcome the pandemic crisis that we are having now? The second thing is that human life and human capital became very important during the pandemic outbreak, and we should ensure that it stays a priority for the world and for different countries as well. One more thing is that crisis response measures should emit new subsidies and benefits for large corporations and extractive industries, because usually they have a lot of preferences and a lot of subsidies, and they are quite strong, so they do not need any new help from the governments or from international organizations. And usually they emit a lot, and they are not that friendly for environment, so they have some things that affect environment and social aspects. And the fourth thing is that we need to prioritize small and medium enterprises and social entrepreneurs, because they will suffer most from the crisis, and they will have to fire their employees, and most of them will have no opportunity to survive. And we already see it in Russia. So we see a lot of restaurants and shops and a lot of other small businesses closing down and firing people and having no opportunity to survive. We shall also transit to sustainable agriculture and food production. So what we have now is very unsustainable production chains in this sphere. And we can see this all over the world in many countries. And this might be an opportunity to innovate and to introduce new ways of production. And the last points are on renewable energy. So we should continue our transition towards energy efficient technologies and renewable energy. And of course, we should develop low carbon and circular economy. And we can do all this only together with partners from other countries. And I think that globalization cannot stop now, because we are dependent on each other, and nothing can be produced just in one country. So there will be some setback, but I think that we will overcome it very soon. So thank you. I think that that's all that I wanted to say.
Thank you, Tatiana, very much. This is a very good setting the stage presentation, and it shows us a variety of issues that the world will be facing, separate countries will be facing. And I like your point about globalization, because it's definitely clear even now that we are very much dependent, and we see how the crisis impacts all of us, even the situation with the borders. Yeah, it shows that we are very much interlinked. But what I would like also to stress your attention to the point that besides the COVID-19 that we are currently facing, and which is a great challenge for the humanity nowadays, before, and we have a lot of ongoing crises. We have food security crisis, we have a lot of conflicts, we have a lot of disintegration processes which are going nowadays. And I would like to use the next session for us to see what are the key challenges we have besides the COVID. And it may it makes us all feel and understand that the situation is more even critical, because we are not having the only problem of COVID, but we have lots of others, and the situation is getting very much complicated. So with this, I would like to start our first session, and I would like to invite Kudryshova Polina to speak on the future of international relations, which face the trend for disintegration. And she will share her perspective how the countries will be able to cope with this global change on their own, or they will require support from others. So Polina, I'm passing the floor to you, so please turn on your mic and video.
Hello, everyone. The main focus is the implications global changes have on society. Those things that matter most to us, like natural disasters, how our societies live, where we live, peace, conflict, all sorts of things like that. Of course, these effects will be different. But what countries will suffer more from it is unpredictable and sometimes surprising. For example, one of the inevitable world problem is climate change. It's expected to affect vulnerable countries first and worst. However, according to the worldwide research, countries in very exposed areas, particularly in developing world like Bangladesh in Asia, many African countries, many Latin American countries, ironically those that have the least ability to adapt to changes in weather and changes in the climate will be affected the worst. Several of the considerable reports indicate that the majority of the world population will be affected by shortfalls in coming decades, though that huge impact on the availability of food and its distribution. So if countries will not support each other, we will see a disbalance in spreading of the world population and disproportion of nations on the planet in general. According to last researchers, one of the countries most affected by global changes is Ethiopia. The World Food Programme says that Ethiopia has something like 200,000 metric tons of grain on store, which means that if Ethiopia faced a massive food shortage, they would have 4 days to feed their nation. And when people get hungry, things can get unstable quickly. And how this problem can be solved? One old and even in my view usual method is sending a father to another country through migration to earn some money and send earns back. So one country indirectly, because it's not a cash donation, provides assistance, gives a chance to earn money to a dying nation. There is a widening gap between those who can adjust emerging challenges and those who cannot. We need to find ways to invest the closing this gap. It's necessary for saving world balance of life for each nation and our planet in general. Global changes have an essential, profound impact on our development goals. I'm thinking about jobs, about education. I'm talking about the ability to exist for international relations in the future, and consequently the ability to make economic progress for each country. I'm very convinced that cooperation of countries is a key solution which can lead to sustainable development goals. Consider one simple and household example, because global changes are always caused by our daily routines. About 40% of our trash is made up of thrown away food. I must remind you that landfills also lead to global warming. And so that's the major challenge to save our planet from a big mess. At an individual level, our shopping decisions, our consumption patterns, what we buy and throw away are absolutely critical. Those individual decisions, so when you add them up, only your mindfulness makes a huge difference. Unfortunately, doubt, of course, the behavioral change has to happen at every level, when all people and communities will participate in the salvation. One man, no man. It's a very famous saying, and I assume you know its meaning. And it is really deep and relevant today. Pay attention to what happens with our world today. Almost all countries suffer from the rapid spread of dangerous virus. Yes, countries are forced to isolate themselves and to close border. Nowadays, it's about 70 countries all over the world. But does it mean that the world pays the trend for disintegration? Maybe, but it's a necessary measure today. No matter that one country cannot cope with this pandemic alone. Maybe it would be possible to create a vaccine and cure your own nation, but what would be after that? The virus will return. It cannot be destroyed only at the level of one state. This is a worldwide problem that will be undoubtedly solved only with the effective cooperation of all countries. One man, no man. Thank you for your attention.
Polina, thank you very much for this very inspiring presentation, and I think that everyone will agree to your point that the key solution is in our joint collaboration and cooperation, because on their own it will be extremely difficult for countries to cope with this. But that get us to the next portion of questions. So we talk about a separate country, and the country is facing sort of the disintegration process, both inside and within the region. Will it be more difficult for the country to cope with the challenges, or how the country will manage this? So with this, I would like to pass the floor to Donika Yotova, and Smirnova Anastasia later on, and Kristina Novichkova, who will cover the topic of Brexit and highlight different aspects on raising the issues of EU relations, trade policy, and overall British government position under the Brexit process. So Donika, over to you first. So please make sure you fit into the 5 minutes or even less.
Okay,
so,
thank you. Just a second to start the presentation. Well, I guess you see my presentation now. So let me first of all, I would like to say that it is an honor for me being here with you. Also, I would like to thank to all the organizers and all participants for this amazing conference. As you can see, the topic of my present is Brexit procedure and its effects on the UK-EU relations. So the main purpose of this report is to form an idea of future economic and political relations in terms of Brexit procedures, and analyze all existing and forming problems of the new political conjuncture. Great Britain is a leader on the world stage and plays a special role, both in the European Union and in the international relations connected to the majority of the ongoing processes on the other continents. On the other hand, up until 2016, no one doubted about the success of the EU model and the integrity and unity of the European Union. Nevertheless, Let me begin with explaining the Brexit crisis and possible implications for Britain and the European Union. So the first part is the economical consequences. A new trade agreement would raise tariffs and cause inflation. Brexit will eliminate Britain's tariff trade status with the other EU members, and also tariffs would raise the cost of exports. That would hurt United Kingdom exporters, and goods will become more expensive in Europe. Tariffs would also increase the prices of imports into the United Kingdom. If we need to be more concrete and speak in numbers, for example, in 2018, the European Union was accounted for 44% of United Kingdom exports. In the same year, the share of UK imports from the EU amounted to 53% of all its imports. Bear this in mind, business should be prepared for the UK leaving the European Union without making a deal on 21st of December this year. This will cause many changes with the current set tariffs, as I already mentioned. This will mainly affect the goods trading as well as import and export of textile and food. The tariffs for meat, tobacco products will be set above 50%, and trading with textiles and food will be reduced by up to 90%. On the European Union side, one of the most affected will be Ireland, Germany, Poland, and the Netherlands, of course. Ireland does not intend to leave the European Union, and it might lead to tightening the current customs border between Northern Ireland and so-called Republic of Ireland. The 30-year conflict between mainly Catholic Irish nationalists and pro-British Protestants might be reignited due to above mentioned expected consequences of United Kingdom leaving the European Union. The problem with Germany is other. Germany exports a wide range of manufactured goods to the United Kingdom, including nearly 800,000 cars a year, or about 14% of all that are produced there. Having the UK import tariff changed will have a hard negative impact on the secondary sector of the German economy. Many European countries will be affected by the so-called divorce, and the colossal number of migrants, which is around 17% of all people employed in the UK in 2018, were born abroad. The hardest hit would be taken by Poland, with its approximately 1 million nationalists resident in the UK. Trading between Netherlands and Great Britain is significant, but partially oversized by so-called Rotterdam effect. Brexit is expected to ruin both internal European Union relationships as well as the United Kingdom's external economy partnerships with a huge number of countries, not only within the European Union, but also with the third-party countries. So in conclusion, I would like to say that the act of leaving the Union would leave someone uncertain future for the whole island. Thank you.
Thank you, Donika, very much. You touched based on very important issues. So while Smirnova Anastasia is getting prepared to be the next to cover the trade policy after the Brexit, and we already touched based on some of the trade issues within Donika's presentation, I encourage the participants to leave questions to the speakers and to the expert in the chat window while they are presenting. So Anastasia, the floor is yours.
Good morning. I'll start with a short description of trade structure. 45% of export are services such as financial, travel, transportation services. Main importers for services are non-European Union countries. For example, the USA buys 23% of total service export. Main trading goods are machinery equipment, transport, and fuels. Main trading partners are the USA, Germany, France, and China. In general, the UK imports more than it exports, resulting in a trade deficit of goods and a surplus of services. Now I will tell about possible changes in tariff measures. Currently, according to the European Union trade policy, the number of duty-free tariff lines is 80%. The government of the UK suggested the cancellation of 87% of tariff lines. Besides, the government wanted to increase tariff lines for the European Union and decrease for other countries. But nowadays, they consider that this measure can significantly reduce the competitiveness of national manufacturers. Now they think that the best way is to simplify the tariff regime, taking into account the requirements of British enterprises and households. One of the proposed measures is the complete cancellation of tariffs less than 2.5%, tariffs on production components used in factories, and on goods analogs of which are not produced in the UK or are produced in limited quantities, which will help reduce the price for consumers and to reduce costs for local producers. There is also a requirement to round existing tariffs and to convert agricultural tariffs into simple percentages. As for non-tariff measures, if the UK changes from the European Union standards, this would harm the competitiveness of exporters selling the European Union compliant goods to the UK market. Exporters from the European Union also will be facing an increased time of customs checks according to the European Union Customs Code that sets out procedures required when exporting to a third country. The next slide is about changes in free trade agreements. The European Union has 43 free trade agreements with 70 countries. It's 14% of the UK trade. At present, it has been possible to sign 20 FTAs, similar to the old European Union agreements, with 48 countries, which trade share is 8.5% of the total. The most significant FTA in terms of trade are with Switzerland, Ireland, and Norway and South Korea. Also, the government says it is still negotiations with 16 more countries. And one of the key priorities is to deepen trade and investment relations with the United States, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, because its share in total trade is very high. Also, the UK needs an agreement with the European Union to prevent new tariffs and other trade barriers after the transition period. Prime Minister Boris Johnson told that FTA with the European Union should be similar to the ones that Canada and the Union have. Perhaps it will be similar to the partnership with Australia. FTA with Canada provides that tariffs on the most of goods is cancelled. However, there are some additional checks, such as custom checks and VAT. It also contains progressive commitments to promote labor rights, environmental protection, and sustainable development. Partnership between European Union and Australia doesn't change the tariff measures from the most favorable nation, but it consists a set of shared policy objectives regarding trade and investment. In the worst case, if the agreement wouldn't be signed, the UK will have to trade with the European Union in basic rules by WTO. In this case, the tariffs will be applied to the 90% of UK export. This would make British goods more expensive and more difficult to sell in Europe. It will also mean a full check of goods at the border, which can cause delays in ports. In any case, the European Union barriers to importing services from third countries are on average 4 times higher than between the member states. Services should be licensed in the European Union. There could be different requirements to data transfer, insurance policies, etc. Also, there would be harder for workforce to trespass the border. So to sum everything up, business of Britain is not ready for tariff increase with the European Union. To cancel the most of tariff lines, British exporters will have to prove that their products comply with the European Union standards. European Union should be sure that British firms do not receive unfair competitive advantages due to, for example, weak labor or environmental and product standards. Actually, that's all what I wanted to say. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Anastasia, for this nice presentation. We see that although business seems to be very strong, but still might suffer a lot due to the disintegration process, not only the countries themselves, but the businesses also could run losses. So with this, I would like to pass the floor to Kristina Novichkova, who will cover the overall British government's position over the Brexit. And with this, we will be able to sum up the whole Brexit story. Kristina?
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you well, yeah.
I'd like to greet everyone today, and thanks to those people who have already made these speeches. It was very interesting. And my article is devoted to Brexit process and the British government positions under its realization. And the aim of my research is to explain you how it is important for policymakers to correspond with people's requirements and how it can lead to inevitable consequences such as the European Union disintegration. Now, please look at the first slide, and here you can see the key dates of Brexit. So the process of the UK departure is quite long-lasting, as it has been happening since June 2016. That date was the starting point when the results of referendum to leave or to stay in the European Union were published. And everybody knows that 52% were for leaving and 48% were against it. Then, almost in a year, the UK government triggered Article 50 to begin the UK's withdrawal from the EU. Later, Theresa May agreed a Brexit deal with 27 other leaders in November 2018. Initially, the exit had to be completed in March 2019, but later the House of Commons triply rejected the deal, as the members of parliament were not satisfied with the conditions of their leaving. So it was an enforced delay until October 31, but in June 2019, Theresa May stepped down as Prime Minister because she couldn't find the further way, and Boris Johnson replaced her post, who strictly decided to withdraw from the Union with or even without a deal. In December 2019, ministers backed legislation to take the UK out of the European Union on January 31 this year. Next slide, and the table on it illustrate us the differences between May's deal and Johnson's one. And you can see 4 core areas that are covered in each withdrawal agreement. And let's compare them with each other. So speaking about the transition period, It starts on February 1st, 2020 and ends up in December 31, 2020. And you can see the main differences between them. Boris Johnson has eliminated the possibility of the transition period extension, while May didn't make such statement, and it is possible to extend it to 1 or even 2 years for once. Further, the amount of money that the UK has to pay the European Union to get out from their partnership. And the exact contribution amount will be estimated by the joint committee. The point about the UK and EU citizens' rights are similar in both deals, and it is claimed here that exceptionally during the transition period, the citizens' rights of both parties will be the same, as well as conditions for businesses, consumers, investors, students, and researchers. And the most arguing area is a border arrangement. Theresa May wanted to keep a border between the Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland open, and to include the backstop, while Johnson renegotiated the regional withdrawal agreement with the European Union, and he is going to remove this backstop and to create a customs border. Its final version was signed recently on January 24th in 2020. Actually, I'd like to speak about Brexit timeline and two realistic scenarios, because the change of the UK's return to the European Union is almost unreal and equal to 0. So the first option, if the parties can't reach the final agreement, Johnson is determined to withdraw from the EU in any circumstance. In this worst scenario, the UK will be imposed to pay export tariffs to the European Union. Or eventually the UK and the EU agree on each terms of the new trade deal, and the new relationships will start. It's a really prospective scenario, as recently the first round of negotiations was held, and the second one should have been conducted, but it was cancelled because of the current COVID-19. And we've just come to the conclusion of my speech. On this slide, you can observe the main final points of my research. So the first one, if a leader represented by the UK Prime Minister in this case doesn't meet the elite and society needs, there is a big chance that finally he or she won't have a power, as because of the high rate of disapproval, nobody allows him or she to continue the policy. Keeping with the theme, if a leader achieves common expectations, he or she is able to implement all ideas and plans. And Boris Johnson is a living example how his intention can result in the European Union disintegration. And the last but not the least, if Brexit goes successfully and the UK acts as an independent from the EU state well, it can be a precedent for other countries to leave the Union too. And in fact, it remains to be seen whether such separation will be successful or not. So that's all. Thank you for listening, and don't hesitate to ask questions if you have them. Thanks.
Christina, thank you very much. And you raised a very interesting point, and we can see interconnection of the internal states issues with the COVID-19. So it means that we are more than interconnected, and all the what is happening worldwide is also very much connected to internal issues of the country, and definitely impacts what's going on, especially in the case of Brexit. So again, I encourage everyone to ask questions in the chat window, and we are moving to the next country, to Spain, and I would like to invite the next speakers, Anna Toplisheva and Smirnova Valeria, who will cover the disintegration process in Spain.
Yes, hello.
Yes.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can hear you.
Good morning, everyone. My colleague Valeria and I would like to cover the topic Catalonians' failed attempt to secede from Spain. So, just a second. So, Spain is a unitary state, but has features of federalism, as it's divided into 17 autonomous communities. So some of them have their own language, their own cultural traditions, they have their own history, and for several years they have been movements in a number of regions of Spain that advocates self-determination in a number of regions of Spain on a national or a regional basis. Somewhere there are registered in political parties, participate in the work of parliament and local administration. And somewhere they are represented only by a few groups that do not have the support of voters. The events of Catalonia related to her attempt to secede from Spain revealed the separatism mood in the country as a whole, which causes concern for the central authorities. They attempt to toughly resist any attempts aimed and as I say in Madrid towards the Balkanization of Spain, that is its division following the example of former Yugoslavia. The conflict of sovereignty and self-determination is an acute problem for the entire world community. There is no clear separation in the theoretical approach in solving the problem, and there are no rules governing such solutions. So Spain, as I have already mentioned, is a unitary state in terms of its territorial structure, and in accordance with the constitutions, the country is divided into autonomous communities. Spanish authorities officially recognize that Spanish is the most decentralized state in Europe today. Each region has a different degree of autonomy, but the Spanish government itself emphasizes that the level of this autonomy is quite high, especially in the economic sphere. So globalization processes actively influence nationalistic processes in different countries, and Spain also is a part of that. From the point of view of Madrid, the national movements in Catalonia is separatist. There are several reasons of separatism, including social, cultural, economic, and political. And so Catalonia has been an integral part of Spain since the founding of the country. Of course, Spain is also a country with a complex history formed by the union of different medieval kingdoms. The Catalans actively participated in this process, helping to develop the country's first constitution of Cadiz in 1812, which created the modern Spanish nation.
Okay.
Yes, I'm going to give the floor to my colleague Valeria.
Yes, thank you, Anna. So the complex history of Spanish is reflected in the language. While the Catalan Galician and Basque languages, sorry, spoken by the Spaniards, Castilian is the mother tongue of most of them, of approximately 82% of the Spanish. It is also the mother tongue of approximately 55% of Catalans. Catalan society is an indisputable part of Spanish society, and it is easy for Catalans to identify themselves as compatriots of all the other Spaniards. The economies of Spain and Catalonia are closely related. About 40% of Catalonia's exports are to Spain. The Catalan separatist movement wants to emphasize the alleged differences between Catalonia and Spain as if they could be seen as two different nations. Only a minority of Catalans share this opinion, since according to surveys, less than 43% of the population feel that they are exclusively Catalans, and more than 50% identify themselves as Spaniards. The current constitution of 1978 was successful in creating a country while maintaining unity, provided for the creation of autonomous communities, which allowed various regions of Spain to receive limited rights to self-government. Currently, the regional government oversees education, healthcare, some infrastructures, police surveillance, and prisons. The Spanish government reserves the authority in the field of customs. Many Catalans are quite happy with the current situation, which includes membership in the European Union for Spain. That is why many Catalans are concerned about the separatist movement, which is now controlled by the government and the regional parliament. They do not want a movement towards complete independence, which will separate them from Spain and turn Catalonia into something else than what it is now. The population of Catalonia is concerned that such a separation will alienate Catalonia from the European Union, despite the separatist mantra that the independence of Catalonia will not lead to expulsion from the EU. And though in practice, if Catalonia becomes a new state, it cannot be a member of the EU until member states approve it. This will require years of negotiation at best, a scenario of uncertainty and risk which is neither justified and nor is desirable. In its quest to create a new state, the regional government is already breaking the law, challenging the courts and usurping the powers of the states. For example, public schools provide most classes in Catalan, even to children who speak Spanish as their mother tongue. The power that the regional government exercises in foreign affairs is used in attempts to establish diplomatic relations with other countries in order to gain international support. In the process, the Catalan government is suspected of using public funds to build structures that the new state will need. These actions of the regional government threaten the democratic guarantees that the Catalans recognize in the Spanish constitution. If the separatists in the parliament and the executive branch of Catalonia continue their reckless pressure on independence, they will jeopardize all the benefits of stability, prosperity, and security that the Catalans have enjoyed for decades being part of the EU and for centuries being part of Spain. In October of 2017, there was an illegal referendum for independence of Catalonia, which resulted in the quite aggressive interference of Spain. In the end, Catalonia was not pronounced as an independent state and was only supported by Abkhazia and South Ossetia, which are not even considered as countries by the EU, by the United Nations, I mean. This national disintegration is not the only example, and many countries like Great Britain have already faced such crises. In conclusion, the relations between Catalonia and Spain is the first example of a new type of separatism in the world, which is based not on cultural, linguistic, or political principles, but rather on the economical factor. This is the first crisis associated with economic secession, the idea of which is the belief that the country will live better under autonomy. Apart from that, the country would also like to become the world's next actor in international relations. In our opinion, if we are to make a forecast, the most efficient way out of the crisis would be the cautious federalization of Spain according to the administrative economic principle and not the ethno-linguistic one. And it should be done within the framework of Spanish constitution. The point that we wanted to make is that we should keep a close eye on regional conflicts, because sometimes actors seek to internationalize such conflicts. And during the crisis caused by the pandemic, we do not want to allow even more instability among one country or many other countries. Apart from that, successful disintegration can trigger other parts of countries which also dream of being independent. Countries are very dependent of each other, especially in the EU. We also wanted to demonstrate that Catalonia is an important part of the European Union's economy, and therefore a new wave of a conflict like this can result in some economical losses for Spain and for Great Britain as their first trade partner. So we hope that the uncertainty surrounding the situation will be resolved successfully without badly affecting Spain's neighboring countries. And thank you for your attention. I think that is it.
Thank you very much, Valeria and Anna, for your great presentation and great conclusions. We really hope that the future of Spain is bright and they will find the best solution that will not impact people and will not impact regional states. So we really hope for a better resettlement of this. With this, I would like to pass the floor and continue our discussion on the regional aspects. And invite Anna Vlasenko to speak on the Eurasian Economic Union and what could be a new driver for the Union to become more influential in the region.
Good morning.
Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you see my presentation now?
Yes.
Thank you. Well, dear colleagues, I'd like to bring your attention to the current barriers on the way of the EU deepening its integration, and just to think about some ways and some solutions that can become a new drivers for the Union to move forward. I'll try to be brief. So the EU has, and right now is one of the most powerful Eurasian integration projects. It has an integrated single market power of 180 million people and a gross domestic product of over $5 trillion. And all the country members of the EU has agreed on united trade, energy, logistics, information, politics, and created roadmaps to implement all those. The same process of implementation is drastically complicated by the unreadiness of the country members to slowly give up parts of their sovereignty. And I think there are a few factors to it. Firstly, we cannot ignore the illusionary fear of some country members that is shared by the European countries, that Russia is somehow trying to suppress its neighbors by pushing this initiative forward to bring back its past influence on those countries. Their main problem here that I see is that political factor still has the leading role in the development of integration process of the EU, rather than economic effectiveness or thoughts about economic benefits we can get from deepening this integration. There are some external factors as well. After the introduction of anti-Russian sanctions, for example, Russia imposed retaliatory sanctions against foreign goods, against exports on those countries. But in a situation of a customs union that we have right now in the EU, not all member states shared that position of Moscow. That led to the appearance of re-exported foreign goods through the countries of the Eurasian Union, and that led to an increase in tensions in relations between partner states. It showed how little cooperation we really have in the face of different challenges. And such solo actions of country members are quite common and always lead to a disbalance of the existing system. Here on the slide, you can see some of the greatest and most important initiatives and so-called roadmaps of the EU. I'll give you just one example with the Common Power Market initiative. Common power market, which means electric power market, is undoubtedly an important step forward to complex integration, which somehow anticipates the common gas and oil markets of our countries. So EU energy sector still operates based on that common Soviet period infrastructure. So what should have been added is the unified standards on security, on equipment, and the creation of trade platforms for energy power. The creation of common power market would definitely boost trade and economic cooperation between the country members. However, there is a drastic difference in energy potential. the level of industry development. There's different schemes of energy market operations right now that complicated the whole integration process to a point where we're 5 years into integration and still don't have the common power market. I also would like to bring your attention to the conjunction of the Eurasian Economic Union and Silk Road Economic Belt, which was also one of the greatest Eurasian integration initiatives. In 2015, at the end of 2015, there was a cooperation agreement signed between the EAEU and China about the integration of two projects. China with its China with its economic resources, with its capital resources, human resources, and the EAEU with its territory, with its nature resources. It should have been the best driver for the development of Eurasian continent. However, Russia's main integration force of the EU right now, and its economic power and their overall ability to unite the countries and to push the Union forward is now challenged by sanctions, by oil market fluctuations, by our internal turbulences and other problems. So in order to play a role of a partner for China's Belt and Road Initiative, the EU and Russia in particular must prove itself capable to contribute financially and politically to the creation of Eurasian logistics corridor. So now it seems that the two integration initiatives are rivals rather than partners. To establish itself capable to contribute is especially important for Russia, as it is not the only way from China to Europe. And currently, China is actively developing at least 3 more infrastructural corridors. And if you look at the map, you can see one that is developing the faster. This is from China to Kazakhstan, Transcaucasian countries, mostly through Azerbaijan, Turkey to Europe. So what solutions can we bring to the challenges that the EU facing now? Well, I think that there are at least 2 things that we can do right now. And the most important one is to create as many joint platforms as possible. And I'm talking about not only the intergovernmental negotiations, but the regional cooperation, integrational and cross-border cooperation. And not only a cooperation of border territories on bilateral basis, but to regional cooperation on a multilateral basis, which will facilitate the exchange of experience between our country, the growth of mutual importance of the markets of member states. It will allow our small and middle-sized businesses to get to know each other, to rub shoulders, and to establish production ties, to create new businesses and to create job places. Secondly is, of course, the realization of foreign trade potential for our union. That is dictated by the need to diversify trade flows in the face of increasing competition, especially in the region, and the need to reduce transaction costs and minimize the influence of politics and everything politics on the economic development of our countries. So I propose to expand the area of cooperation through the signing of non-preferential and preferential trade agreements with the Union, and as well as to form a dialogue interaction between the countries from other regions. That will definitely help to reduce the political influence on the Union and will help us to prosper in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, very much. Interesting presentation and perspective, and it's interesting to see how different countries manage the situation. One country is trying to disintegrate inside themselves, while others search for joint platforms and unions to solve the issue. So it's the interesting perspective, and it's important to keep in mind that different countries choose different paths. So we are moving to the next presentation by Ivanova Nadezhda. on the Euroscepticism in the 21st century. Meanwhile, I would like to ask you to stick to the timing. We are lagging a bit behind, and please try to be short and no more than 4 minutes. Thank you. Do we have Nadezhda? Nadezhda, can you hear us? We don't hear you. Nadezhda, yes, now we see you connected. Nadezhda, we don't hear you. Nadezhda, we don't hear it. Try to unmute you manually, but it doesn't work, so you should unmute and start your video. Now you're unmuted. Yes, please proceed. Yeah, we can't hear you. Nadezhda, we don't hear you. The sound is not going. Okay, let us do the following. While Nadezhda is trying to fix their voice, shall we ask Magomed Dalakov to talk about the implementation of the human rights and the relation between European Parliament resolutions and the Russian Federation?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. But we don't see your presentation.
Hello. Yeah.
Can you share your screen, please?
Yeah, I have some technical problems.
Okay. Magomed, are you starting the video or you're facing any issues with this? Hello.
Excuse me, Yulia, I have some problems with my internet connection.
So you can't put your presentation on, yeah? So it doesn't work.
Just a second, maybe I will do it through the Google Chrome. Just a second. No. Does it work?
No, we see just your name.
Maybe now?
Yeah, now it works. Okay, great. So please proceed.
Yeah, really sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So Good morning, dear colleagues. Sorry for technical problems, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to present my work. So my topic is called Implementation of Human Rights of Rebel Nations, Land and Compensation. And all you know that the Second World War became a big tragedy for multinational USSR communities. So there are millions of dead people, harmed people, missing persons, those who experienced material damage and even lost only property they have, their houses. And almost 65% of citizens identified as poor and miserable. And that were a hard time, overcrowded by serious problems, covering most of human institutes that were ruined during the war. And however time goes and the government will celebrate 75th year from the day of victory, there is no doubt it is a great date and great time, better than ever, and many problems are solved, but not all of them. We must know and always remember that plenty of problems were caused by USSR itself. An excellent example and at the same time a terrible event was happening during a long time of history of Russian Empire and USSR towards Caucasian nations. And the topic I'd like to discuss is related to repressions towards English people in time of the war. And Republic of Ingushetia also actively participated in the Second World War, defending Russian borders. And there are a lot of heroes were among English people. And unfortunately, the fateful moment had come and decree issued by Joseph Stalin in 1944 was ratified. And in accordance with the decree, all English and Chechen people were forcibly deported to Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. And a lot of people were murdered due to the brutal regime of USSR government. And the reason was guesses about cooperation between Germany and English and Chechen nations. But it was lie and history proves it. So the problem is that during deportation, more than 25% of people were dead and lost all their property. And the land of our of English Republic was distributed between its neighbors. And after 11 years of unfair exile, people were back to their home republic. But now whole land was returned and people didn't get a decent compensation. And after 70 years, the problem is not fully solved. And there is a law of the RSFSR of 26th of April 1991 on the rehabilitation of repressed people. In accordance with this law, the state is obliged to return the original territories and to compensate for the damage caused during deportation. And today, I can say that with confidence that the state hasn't coped with the task and hasn't solved the important problems of the repressed republic. And 26th of February 2004, the European Parliament adopted a resolution. Paragraph 15 of this resolution states that the action of the Soviet Union is in relation to the oppressed during deportation is recognizing as act of genocide. And summing up, I'd like to say that these problems must be solved very quickly. The fact is that neglect of such things can lead to inhibition of the development of the entire state and even lead to a new war. So the problem should be solved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Magomed, and thank you for keeping the timing. Very interesting angle and the perspective on the crisis that happened long ago, but still we see some impacts in the current situation. So I talked to Nadia, and seems that her audio is still not working. So with this, let me review the chat, and we have one question. I think the question was to Anna Vlasenko, and The question was about the shadow economy and the prospects of the, yes, I'm trying to find the question. So the question is from Kirill Kazakov, and it's the following. So how do you assess the prospects of the Eurasian Economic Union in the field of customs due to the fact that the shadow economy plays a key role in economic development of Kazakhstan and Belarus? If possible, Anna, could you please very quickly share your perspective with regard to this question?
Yes, thank you. Kirill, thank you for your question. Actually, that's a very interesting point that you brought up. I'm not sure that I can absolutely agree that the shadow economy right now is the key. It has the key role in the development of Kazakhstan and Belarus, but maybe I'm just not that much knowledgeable precisely in the economic of Kazakhstan and Belarus. But I believe that the EU and the prospects of its future development can be quite bright if we strengthen the business cooperation between our country. It should be not top-down decisions about the integration process if we're talking about economical benefits and the economic effect of it. We should bring up the business problems that our countries have and to somehow bottom up develop this integration, and maybe shadow economy won't be such a problem if our businesses will rub shoulders and to get to know each other better. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your answer and explanation. So with this, let me move to the next sub-session because we're really in need of time. So we are moving to the geoeconomic sub-session of our panel discussion, and here we will concentrate on the impact of sanctions, the role of the government in the business regulation. We'll talk about the global competition over and transport infrastructure. With this, I would like to give the floor to Kusela Yulia Sofia with your presentation on the Belt and Road Initiative. Yulia, the floor is yours. Timing would be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, can you see the PPT?
Yes, we see this. Go ahead.
Great. Making it full screen. All right. So you see that, yeah? Okay. So, dear all, the Belt and Road Initiative sparked major interest for me, and I'd like to share with you the outcomes of my research. So in September 2013, President Xi Jinping presented Beijing's intentions to foster economic and multilateral ties in Eurasia. The Belt and Road Initiative implies developing extensive railroads, pipelines, ports, airports, and up-to-date inland communication links throughout Asia, Middle East, Africa, Europe, and Russia. The initiative itself consists of two parts, the land-based and the sea-based Silk Road, and is considered to be a key tool in Chinese strategy aimed at both trade and political expansion. Since every project needs finances, Chinese-led Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank was set up shortly after the BRI was announced. This institution complements existing international leaders such as the World Bank and Japan-led Asian Development Bank. Beijing succeeded in establishing a major institution which implements infrastructure projects within two continents. However, consequently, it deepens discord between global actors such as the USA, Japan, and PRC that nowadays govern world economic trends. The White House even said that it is not the best way to engage a rising power. The bank is perceived now as an attempt to challenge American and Japanese financial influence. It is worth mentioning that countries are very keen on Chinese money flows, but unfortunately their ability to return borrowed capital are sometimes limited. Several facilities in Pakistan, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, other countries, as well as the Greek port of Piraeus, have already been affected. So the states faced two ways of paying the debt: to grant either ownership rights of a facility to China or provide a long-term lease which brings its profits to Beijing up to 99 years. And that's what happened. Moving on. Nonetheless, trying to avoid direct and open confrontation with the states, China invites the European Union to cooperate through BRI. Notably, 18 EU members have already signed up for the project, as well as even one G7 member, Italy. As for some already completed projects, for instance, Greek port Piraeus was modernized in conjunction with the Belgrade-Budapest railway section that facilitate and speed up Chinese goods delivery to the very center of Europe. Meanwhile, the EU tries to strike some kind of a balance between Asian investment intentions and key partnership with the US. It's no secret that economics shapes politics, which may create ground for closer ties and willingness to attain compromises in other areas as well. As a consequence of intensive exploitation of ports and vessels, there are some delays in supply chains. Therefore, Beijing is looking for new sustainable routes that ensure immediate access to markets and resources. Firstly, Polar Silk Road is being explored and developed at a promising, very promising Arctic path, not controlled by the US Navy and completing the overloaded Suez Canal. Secondly, Central Asia enjoys major ongoing investment projects, since it is seen as a gateway to Europe due to its vast territories. Unfortunately, the threat, Central Asia found itself in that threat. And thirdly, PRC seeks to upgrade existing ports and infrastructure. To sum up, the Belt and Road Initiative is by far the largest and the most viable project in Eurasia in terms of economic investment and infrastructure opportunities. But political discord between China, Japan, and the US may impede implementation. Undoubtedly, PRC is the ultimate beneficiary that expands Chinese-led transport corridors and controlled areas, eventually enhancing its geo-economic influence. Thank you for attention.
Thank you very much, Yulia. This is a great presentation, very comprehensive, raises a lot of issues, financial, international institutions, role of China in the region. There's a great infrastructure project which seems to create great opportunities, but also challenges for those who will be involved in this. So it seems that it will be the key project over the decades in this region, and the role of China might be getting more and more important in this region and beyond. So we are moving also to the another point of China's role, and this is Arctic policy. And I would like to ask Andrei Dagaev to start his presentation and share his perspective on the risks of Russia.
Okay. Do you hear me clearly?
Yes, Andrei, we hear you, but we don't see your video.
And what about the demonstration of the screen?
The demonstration is on, yes.
Okay.
We see Yulia. Now we see, yes, good to go.
Okay, good morning, dear participants of the conference. And today I want to, Today I want to present you a paper on a topic which is discussed among the researchers all over the world, and it's connected with Arctic region, because over the last years, especially since the beginning of the 21st century, the importance of Arctic region in economic and political processes has been increasing steadily, and interest of Arctic states to the region is driven by climate changes and prospects of economic exploration, because Arctic contains about 1/3 of unexplored oil and natural gas deposits, and it's also a very prospective region in the field of sea navigation and scientific research. But not only the Arctic states are interested in the exploration of Arctic, and under the governance of Chairman Xi Jinping, Chinese diplomacy reviews the concept of called Caoguang Yanghui, which means keep a low profile and bide for your time. And countries start to demonstrate its persons in different regions. This shift has been translated into publishing China's Arctic policy white paper in January 2018. And despite the fact that white paper is written in figurative style, it includes some basic concepts what China wants to reach in Arctic. It's connected with going to know Arctic better, explore Arctic, and also take part in enhancing system of Arctic governments. And in view of China, its participation in Arctic cooperation and accepting of its initiatives will contribute to the realization of shared destiny of the world people concept, and also building Polar Silk Road, which was mentioned by the previous speaker. And risk of Russia begin here, because for Russia, development of Arctic territories is one of the national priorities in the field of national security and development of resource potential. And on the one hand, after Russia has been imposed by sanctions of Western countries, Chinese Silk Road Foundation has become the main investor of Yamal LNG project and cooperates with Russia in an active way in Arctic. On the other hand, China considers Arctic sea roads as a common shared destiny of the mankind and believes that it can be monopolized by Arctic states. That's why Russia's national transport corridor, which is called Russian Northern Sea Road, is also considered as a part of Polar Silk Road initiative. Russian Arctic ports are seen as a point of interfacing of Polar Silk Road and Russian initiatives. And it's proved by a number of articles and news in People's Daily and Xinhua Agency, where they call Northern Europe as a door to Chinese goods, while Russian Northern Sea Road isn't estimated as an independent project. And there is an opinion expressed among researchers that Russian road is the link between China and Europe, and China don't have to develop Russian infrastructure. And summarizing, it's noteworthy that China is not insisting on the nationalization of Arctic sea roads and Arctic subsoil within Arctic Council or other international format, and officially doesn't have plan of using Arctic in military purposes. Nevertheless, there is a possibility that China will make some efforts to remove the restriction for navigation in exclusive economic zones or territorial waters, for instance, of Russia, and make Arctic more inclusive in response to increasing of the interest to the region. And these activities will find opposition and resistance of Russian leaders. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Andrei. Interesting perspective. So not only economic, but also ecologic, environmental issues are included into the agenda of cooperation of China and Russia. And with this, we are moving to the point that you raised in the end of your presentation, in fact, cooperation in the gas and oil area. And I would like Maria Kozareva to start the presentation on the exports to China and again highlight some ecological and economic aspects. Maria? It seems that we don't have is Maria with us or not? It seems that she is not, and I'm getting a message that she is not participating in the conference. Unfortunately, we will not hear about the gas and oil exports, but still we have enough speakers who would be able to cover different aspects of business regulation. And then I would like to invite Vladimir Puzanov to talk about the situation with the Russian companies and how they operate under the international sanctions. Vladimir?
Hello, everyone. I'm here.
Yes, we don't see your presentation and we don't see you. Now it's better. Okay, we see your presentation.
Is it okay?
Yes, but we don't see you.
You won't see me actually.
Yeah, the video. You can turn on the video button.
My camera is scratched so hard, so you won't see me properly. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, leave it like this. Yeah. Okay, noted. Yeah, the presentation is more important.
So good
Go
morning,
ahead.
everyone. My name is Vladimir Puzanov, and thanks everyone for their participation in this conference. And in my brief speech, I would like to cover the topic how Russian companies operate under international sanctions. And also I will try to explain the influence on our country and on the world in general. The topic is highly debatable and acute today. When it comes to the discussion of sanctions, the fact
Vladimir, yeah, wait a second. We see the green screen. Can you try to fix this? Because we previously saw the presentation slide, but now it's the green screen. Yes, now it's better. Yeah, go ahead.
So the topic is highly debatable and acute today. When it comes to the discussion of sanctions, the fact of the influence on our country quickly comes to our minds. So I'd like to explain which spheres of social life and which lines of work of companies they affect. And since 2014, when sanctions were introduced first, they have influenced and continue to have an impact on such spheres as technologies, military, finances, politics, commerce, social sphere, and so on. This was expressed in restrictions on the supply of technological and military equipment, restrictions on rights of particular government officials, banks and organizations, reduction in flows of investment and important goods from foreign partners. This and many other subsequent steps resulted in the fall of the ruble exchange rate, inflation, tax increases which affected the Russian economy, issues caused by sanctions which somehow refer to our country can be listed further and further. So let's move on. As our foreign partners stopped supporting trade relations, links between us were ruined, and this has led to worse cooperation in political issues and work of companies on international market, as well as alienating from the West countries. This is the reason why sanctions disintegrate countries and resist the process of their collaboration and mutual help. That is the global phenomenon of the Western penalties. However, the Russian government and companies are trying to find ways to avoid negative influence on the sanctions and minimize risks of the economic decline. So let's look into the political attitude of Russia towards actions taken by the United States and Europe and measures taken by Russian companies in accordance with the view of Russian governance. The positive side of sanctions, which helps our companies to struggle with the current situation and find ways to improve, it is the expansion of economic links with China, which makes companies less dependent on the United States dollar. Generally, the partners maintain relations in numerous directions, which brings the benefit to both China and Russia. Another favorable thing for our organizations is that sanctions contributed to replacement of foreign companies' imported goods by ones produced by domestic manufacturers. This consequently made our country, and especially companies, less dependent on supporting relations with a number of foreign. Moreover, in response to Western restrictions, Russia prohibited the entry of products of companies of those countries which approved the policy of the United States, due to what Russian manufacturers got rid of foreign competitors on the market and now strengthen their positions on it. And the final point I consider would be worth covering is that Russian government began to subsidize the agricultural growth in production of food companies and strengthens foodstuff sovereignty of our country. So these are positive aspects of sanctions I've told right now. And this way, Russia and its producers managed to deal with difficulties and remain operating more or less stable. So thank you for your attention. I hope that I have managed to cover my topic clearly.
Thank you very much, Vladimir, for your presentation. It's a very important topic nowadays, and everyone is still, despite the COVID-19, the situation with sanctions is still very acute for Russia. So with this, I would like to give the floor to the next speaker, Krasnova Anastasia, who will talk about the legal and political incentives for business development in Russia under sanctions. So Anastasia. Anastasia, are you in? Seems that we're missing Anastasia as well. So then we need to see who is the next in our agenda. Then Kirill Kazakov, I would suggest that he would take the floor. He will talk about the Rail Baltica and how the global trends will be implemented in the Baltic states, given the ongoing situation and challenges. So Kirill, could you please take the floor and make your presentation, please? Yes, we see the screen, yeah.
Do you see my presentation?
Kirill, then your voice is very low and the sound is awful. Yeah.
Okay, I need 1 second to change the microphone.
Yeah, could you please try? Because there were noises. Kirill, try to turn on your video. Probably it would work better. So we lost Kirill so he's fixing the PowerPoint. Okay, just not for the sake of time, I would suggest then to move to Ilya Yatsuk. And I think his presentation will be very relevant because that will be a natural continuation on the conversation on the sanctions, on the role of business and government, whether they are allies or not. So Ilya, may I ask you to be the next while Kirill is trying to fix his presentation, please?
Of course, yeah.
Great, we see you.
Yep. So, yes. Right here. So, everything is all right? You can see me well?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Go
thank
ahead.
you. So I'll try to keep up the pace, and so we'll have enough time. So I'm about to talk about government and business, whether they are antagonists or allies. So I'll begin with an intro. It is known that relations between the government and companies have their own history of development. There was a time when the state served as a night watchman, and the market developed on the basis of principles of self-regulation and self-development. When the state had to assume the function of economic conductor, it acquired a number of economic functions and a political structure. It is where the problem of intervention arises. So there started a time when the state and companies started to cooperate. But do they have to be antagonists or allies? That's where I'm going to talk about in this session. So as for the types of help for businesses, it is known that in well-developed countries, government relies on small and medium businesses. So when tough times come, they have to support it whether they want it or not. As for the types of help for businesses, there are financial. Small businesses support programs include subsidies, property. Entrepreneurs get the opportunity to use state property for free or on preferential terms. Information, by creating federal and regional information systems, official websites to provide business entities with relevant information. Consulting, it means providing assistance in the form of professional advice, and educational development programs for training specialists and staff development. Why basically is the state interested in making business prosper, you may ask? I will answer. It is known that new enterprises not only create the productivity of the region, but also create new jobs. To require help from the state, you must be required to prove by calculations and facts, presenting the information in the form of a sensible business plan that that the government should give you the support and consider you worthy. Considering that this money will not be required back, there are many of who want to get such financial assistance. In addition to a prepared plan, there are a number of conditions under which this amount will be charged. And yet there are certain circumstances under which the state still has the right to demand a return. As for the help from the government, Nancy Pelosi once said that everyone says that Steve Jobs has done a great job of developing and designing a smartphone concept, but this is far from the case. The federal government is the true inventor of the iPhone. GPS technology, the principles of high-speed data transfer, wireless voice recognition, and much more, which are key components of the iPhone, was not invented by Jobs. As for the conclusion, I'd like to sum up. So antagonists or allies. Here are some examples of measures taken by governments all over the world to help their businesses to prevail economic crisis of 2020. So Italy. Italy donated 25 billion euro to support the country's economy. It provides for payments of 3.5 billion to support health services and 10 billion to support families and employers. France, an anti-crisis plan to support a business for 345 billion was adopted. In Germany,
I'm really sorry for stopping in. Yeah, we see the numbers. You could just move to the conclusion because we have less than 20 minutes left. Sorry for this.
As you see, all of those numbers, the facts that can summarize my talk is that The world has not seen this amount of support and care for businesses throughout its history, and we hope that these numbers just speak for themselves here. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, and sorry for interruption, but
yeah,
we are lagging behind, and some technical issues also do not support us. Thank you very much. So I was waiting for Kirill Kazakov to come up with Rail Baltica, but he seems to be disconnected. So I would like to pass the floor very quickly to Polina Grigorenko on the nation branding. Polina, are you online?
Yes, I am.
Polina, I have bad news to you. We are very we are running out of time. So if you could, like, very briefly, like in 2 minutes, cover the main aspects of your research, that would be great.
Well, 2 minutes will be difficult for me, but I will try my best to be fast as possible.
You have many slides, but yeah, if you could just, yeah, I understand this is a constraint, but still, this.
Okay, just a minute. Seems like, yes. So good morning, dear colleagues. I'm here today to tell you about nation branding as a part of increasing global competition. So I'd like to start with telling you about the place of nation branding in international relations theory. So nation branding is a part of soft power concept, which is the power of attraction thanks to nations' values, culture, and policies, in contrast to hard power of coercion and, well, economic or military coercion. So both nation branding and public diplomacy are parts of soft power concept. They are distinct but overlapping concepts. They both imply culture, identity, image, and values as their methods, but they differ in their goals. So if public diplomacy is about political interests, nation branding is about seeking economic interests. Public diplomacy is about influencing specific groups of foreign public, such as prominent public opinion leaders or diaspora, and nation branding is about influencing general public. And the last but not least, public diplomacy is about finding common values between nations, so to say making friends in international relations, and nation branding is about highlighting uniqueness of a country to attract target audience. And this brings us to the next topic, to the next point of what nation branding really is. It is a strategic self-presentation and identity formation of a country with the aim of creating attractive image and to seek economic ends. So the premise of nation branding is that the global competition is increasing in the globalized economy, and countries imply branding techniques to attract target audience, which is quite diverse. Target audience is tourists, inward investment, talents, and export markets. And it is also important to note that both domestic and foreign publics are influenced. So as I said earlier, nation branding is about applying branding and marketing tools to promote countries' economic interests, and both public and private actors influence not only nation brand, but they both manage nation branding campaigns. So here I'd like to give you some examples of nation branding. So as I said, both private and public sector is involved. For example, you can see Hungarian Club initiative that was realized in 2000. So for commercial Hungarian campaigns, created kind of a box of Hungarian products to sell it all across Europe, to highlight Hungarian identity before Hungary entered the European Union. So they tried to preserve Hungarian identity by that means. And as for examples from public sector, it's 100% pure New Zealand campaign. It's one of the longest destination branding campaigns, and it is managed by the Tourism Board of New Zealand. and alone in 2007 and 2008, billions of different advertising, pictures, videos, online content was presented to the public to attract tourists to the country, and these efforts were quite successful. And one of the recent examples is Cool Japan strategy. It is also managed by government, and in 2013, Cool Japan Fund was created with the aim of promoting goods and services with added value that is embedded in Japanese culture. And various sectors are involved in this campaign, such as media, fashion, food industry, tourism, and etc. So as an example, only in 2019, more than $30 million were invested in anime licensing company to promote anime in North America. So to create this image and to sell anime like Japanese culture more effectively. So to sum up, I'd like to say that although nation branding is an emerging field of study, its practice dates back to 1990s and it's here to stay. And to me, nation branding reflects not only the fact that global competition is increasing, it also highlights that this competition is becoming more and more sophisticated. So I think that is it. Thank you for your attention. I try to be fast.
Thank you very much, Polina, for understanding and for great presentation outlining the important role of the branding both in the private sector and in the government. So it's really important and it could be a crucial factor. Thank you very much. Very well done. We are moving to the next speaker, Angelina, who will, Angelina Nienatkevich, who will again continue the conversation on the coronavirus and implications for the world. Angelina, are you in?
Yes, I'm here.
Angelina, yes, I have very, you know what I would like to request you. Please try to be very concise, yeah, because we don't have much time left. 11:15 will be the session with Mal, so we need to wrap up by that time, and we have 4 speakers after you, so maximum 4 minutes.
Okay, could you close, please, demonstrate your screen, because I will demonstrate my screen.
I'm not demonstrating my, no, I think it's somebody else doing this. I will try to do this, yeah, so. I think that was Polina's screen.
Yes, yes.
Oh, here we go.
Okay. That's it. Today I'm going to discuss about the important issue about COVID-19. Exactly, my theme is how the coronavirus outbreak may affect Russia-China supply chains. It is widely expected that the year 2020 is going to bring dramatic changes to Russia-China supply chains. Furthermore, China's role as the epicenter of a coronavirus outbreak that could have a critical effect on the Russian economy. Unfortunately, manufacturing business has suffered greatly. In Russia, a serious supply chain related concern is that their country will run out of certain crucial products. For example, while many life savings products are assembled and finished in Russia, China is the world's largest producer of active pharmaceutical ingredients. Also, one of the most famous Russian heavy truck manufacturer, KAMAZ, announced stopping of the main assembly line because of shortage of some spare parts from China. It is too early to draw definite judgments about how the coronavirus outbreak will impact global supply chains. However, the survey indicates that companies are watchful and concerned, as they should be. While the situation is very serious, companies can take sensible precautions. It can be the time to start planning for operating the company, for maximizing free cash flow, no profits. If the crisis deepens, cash has to be reserved. An online survey carried out by the NEET Center of Transportation and Logistics on January 28 with hundreds of respondents from all over the world, including Russia. We can notice that the most companies are manufacturing, followed by distribution and retail. The companies may lose significant percentage of turnover. These graphs demonstrate several firms that were asked how they're reacting to the outbreaks in different countries. To sum up, demand in China is being affected. Many retail stores have been closed. A lot of business activities have slowed down. A lot of companies will have huge problems with product availability in the warehouses. As a result, retail prices will increase, but I hopefully believe that we may prepare for the worst and deal with disruption. Here are some suggestions. Thank you. That's all.
Angelina, thank you very much, and very nice suggestions. I think they're very timely and they're very reasonable. So we'll definitely take them into account. With this, we have the last speaker in this session, Olga Pavlushkova. I know that she's also facing some issues with the IT stuff, but I hope that she will be able to connect. Olga, are you online and can you do your presentation? I think Olga is struggling, so let's move to the last session of our panel discussion, and we'll touch base on the security issues and how all this conflict, confrontation influence the current state of affairs in international relations and the whole globe. I would like to ask Diana Akchan to put her presentation. And
good morning.
Yes, Diana, but again, we have little time left, so if you could fit into 4 minutes would be great.
Oh, dear. So I would like to introduce myself firstly. My name is Diana Akchan. My article is devoted to confrontation of the Islamic Republic and confrontation of the Islamic Republic of Iran with the State of Israel. And the first slide, the purpose of my research is to identify the key stage of confrontation and consideration of its main causes, the analysis of the specific features of its confrontation, and the impact of its conflict on the Middle East region. So I would like to start with a brief historical facts of relationship between Iran and Israel. And I have identified 4 main stages of relation between these states. These are these periods, both before and after the Islamic Revolution, and a period of a change in global geopolitical situation. The pre-revolutionary period during the Shah's regime is characterized by relatively warm relations and usually beneficial cooperation in economical, military, and political spheres. And after the Islamic Revolution in 1979, relations have rapidly deteriorated. New Iranian leader Ayatollah Khomeini proclaims militant and anti-Israel rhetoric and immediately denouncing diplomatic relations. The next period after 1919 is characterized by change in global geopolitical change. in a global geopolitical situation. This is the collapse of USSR, the Operation Desert Storm that undermined the military power of Iraq, and the general intensification of confrontation between the Islamic and Western worlds, and the signing of the peace agreement between Israel and Palestine Liberation Organization. In its turn, Iran, fearing its complete isolation in the Middle East, began to enhance anti-Israeli rhetoric and its influence in the Middle East through arming and financial Hamas and Hezbollah, which Iran created by itself. Moreover, in 1997, Iran re-began to create its own nuclear weapons. And at present, the conflict ongoing and Iran's withdrawal, as the United States did 2 years ago, from the Iranian nuclear deal, which has intensified Israel's fear of its safeness. And I would like to emphasize the uniqueness of this extraordinary confrontation of the last slide. On the last slide, when countries fight against each other, not directly but through their satellites, by comparing the conflict parties, Israel, Hezbollah, and on the one hand, and Turkey and PKK on the other. Thus, we can see a clear difference between these two organizations, that behind Lebanese Hezbollah, there are external political forces represented by Iran, in contrast to the confrontation between Turkey and the PKK, which is purely internal and is not supported by third party. Therefore, even Israel's struggle with Hezbollah leads to increased international tension. It turns out that Iran has become a prime example of such a confrontation without entering into direct conflict with Israel, using for this new actors in world political represented by radical organization Hezbollah and Hamas. I'd like to end my speech. Thank you. What?
Thank you very much, Diana, for your presentation, for keeping the timing. We know that this problem exists, and it's an important one which impacts not only the countries themselves, but the region and the world globally. So thank you for raising these important issues. I would like to ask Igor Zakharov to speak next and tell us about the Western Sahara War and disintegration in African region. So Igor, could you please proceed? Yeah, and try to be concise and to the time specified. Thank you.
Okay, can you see the presentation?
Yes.
All right, I'll make it full screen. Just a second. So I'll try to be brief. So in 1975, a bloody conflict ensued in Western Sahara that saw combatants from Morocco, Mauritania, and Sahrawi Arab Republic, declared by the Polisario Front, fighting each other to control the region. Overall, approximately 15,000 people died during this period, and around 70,000 people were displaced. Overall, currently, the situation remains a status quo. Morocco holds 3/4 of the Western Sahara territory. At the present stage, the conflict represents a frozen one. The ceasefire was signed in 1991, and the disintegration of the region is quite literal. So the Moroccan controlled territory and the free zone controlled by Polisario are divided by a wall and a minefield, which is the largest in the world. And despite the current ceasefire, the situation remains quite unstable. So there were many demonstrations in El Wayun, the capital of the Western Sahara region, against the Moroccan administration, primarily in 2010, 2011. And Morocco is accused by many human rights organizations, so like Amnesty International or Human Rights Watch, have stated that Moroccan authorities have kidnapped those opposing the Moroccan administration, as well as there are just horrible conditions in the prisons in Western Sahara. So internationally, this territory is considered to be terra nullius, So basically, the UN de jure does not recognize anyone's authority, and this territory, again, in judicial terms, does not belong to anyone. And also, there are more than 1,073 refugees living in the largest refugee camp in Tindouf, Algeria. There are also approximately 25,000 refugees living in Mauritania, which also causes a lot of instability in the region. So moving on, the United Nations mission in Western Sahara for referendum is, as the name implies, its main goal was to conduct a referendum on self-determination. However, that goal remains unachieved despite several settlement plans proposed during the period between 1991 and the present stage. So all of these proposals were rejected because the sides of war couldn't agree on how to conduct a population census and how to count the referendum participants. So at this stage, there are approximately 271 military personnel and 2,049 civilian personnel. They mostly just overview the ceasefire and make plans on how to disarm the minefields. So to summarize, at the present stage, there does not exist a plan for holding the referendum, and the viability of the current ceasefire is coming into question because of the many statements of a Polisario Front that have been done about how they should overview the situation if the referendum is not conducted. Thank you very much. That would be all.
Thank you very much, Igor, for this very interesting perspective on the African region. And we see that conflicts take place in all parts of the world, and then they impact not only people, but the neighboring nations. So it's a really worrisome fact that we are facing. I would like to move to Oleg Mezhevov with his perspective on the Syria issue. And Oleg, yeah, the floor is yours. If you could stick to 3 to 4 minutes, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. I'll manage to do that. Okay, good morning to everyone. The topic which I'd like to cover in my presentation is the failure of the Pan-Arabic conception, illustrated by the example of the Ba'ath Party in the Syrian Arabic Republic. As you know, for almost 10 years till nowadays, this particular state is being torn apart by a cruel internal civil conflict. Actually, this conflict is rather complicated and includes many actors, but basically media which cover and give publicity to these events, they focus mostly on the so-called Al-Nusra Front, on radical Islamists as the driving force of the anti-official government of Syria community. So it should be taken into account that for almost 40 years, Syria had not any official religion. It was a secular state, and it was governed by the so-called Party of Arabic Socialistic Reborn, or Ba'ath, in other words, and it was functioning based on the principles of Pan-Arabism. Pan-Arabism, this ideology was firstly introduced in the 1930s, and its core point was to make a huge coalition out of including people of different Arabic states, regardless of their religious beliefs. So they could be Christians as well as Muslims. But finally, this concept was rejected by most of these Arabic governments, which switched back to the principles, to the norms of Islamic law, and this tendency could not help affecting Syria as well too. It should be taken into account, and this is very important, that ethnical and confessional structure of Syrian society is rather difficult. The religious majority in this country is Sunnis, about 70% of whole population. Nevertheless, the government of Bashar Assad and Bashar Assad himself belong to the religious minority of Alawites. And Alawites, this Muslim group is considered by the most of Muslim traditionalists as a heretical community. So the fact that the representatives of a heretical community, they govern the country, and moreover they did it contrary to the principles of Shariat, this fact did not satisfy the majority of Syrian society. Finally, under the pressure, the government of Bashar Assad was forced to admit some of the traditionalist demands. At the referendum, which took place on the 22nd of February in 2012, some of the main points of the Syrian constitution were overviewed. For example, the article on the considerable role of the Ba'ath party in Syria, it was excluded. And nevertheless, finally, these changes, this new political course of the Assad's government did not save the country from the further revolts. So, in conclusion, I may say that the concept of pan-Arabic secular government in Syria has failed completely. Religion still plays a pivotal role in the social life of this country, and remains one of the essential triggers which help this internal civil conflict to develop further. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you for your attention.
Oleg, thank you very much. Very well done, interesting presentation, and again, it's still very acute nowadays. So, colleagues, we are running out of time, but we have some speakers who didn't manage to talk during their turn due to IT issues. That's why I made a decision that we will allow these people to speak, because we made the preparatory work. So I would ask just Nadia just to come in and share her key conclusions and messages from your presentation. Nadia, please.
So if you can hear me, I will start. My topic was about the Euroscepticism. This is an increasingly come forefront party in the Europe, and the firstly, the term became widely known in 1988 when Margaret Thatcher was warned about the independence of Great Britain. And now, even after the elections to the European Parliament 2019, the Eurosceptics won more seats in the European Parliament. So the results of elections confirmed assumption made. And sorry, one second. I'm a bit nervous. And so in the and finishing the after the European Parliament elections, they got so the Euroscepticism made the future of the European project even more uncertain, and we can see the Brexit example, and so the future is unpredictable. So for European parties will struggle for the European project to maintain its developing. So it was a brief overview of my topic. So.
Thank you very much, Nadia, and apologize for this lack of opportunity to present. So I would like to ask Kirill Kazakov to share his messages. So the presentation, yeah, if you could turn on your video, that probably will be better. Go ahead.
Thank you for this opportunity. As you know, the Baltic Railway is a new railway between 3 Baltic states with European standard of gauge. So the positive impact will be integration of the Baltic states into the transport system of Europe and preservation of the unique nature of Baltic states. However, this project is very expensive for Baltic states and has some difference in the standard of gauge with the rest of railways in the Baltic region and neighbors countries. So Rail Baltic will integrate the Baltic states in Europe and save the nature of the region. However, the implementation of the project will damage the Baltic economy in the short term. Thank you.
Kirill, thank you very much. Very well done and concise and to the point, and we got the message. So I would like Olga to be the last speaker, and then we will wrap up.
Yeah, hello everyone. Do you hear me?
We can hear you and see you very well.
Yeah, great. So thank you very much for the attention. The theme of my presentation and the paper was the role of media in the contemporary political conflicts. And the first point of my presentation was to show that right now the media become more impactful instrument in the increasing and solving international conflicts because of the several points. First of all, if we see the instrument that the traditional media used, it was like the broad understanding of the characteristics of the audience. And right now, using the special instrument of micro-targeting, using the social media, new types of media, different kind of social media, as I already said, and another video instrument can make a very big influence on each type of audience. And also we understanding how much people use these kind of new ways of interconnecting new type of media increase the role in the international conflicts. And right now we can see a lot of examples of such kind of situation when different type of routes of information make a very big impact of increasing and solving international conflicts. For example, I researched the conflicts of Russia and United States in 2016 when a lot of politicians and especially political establishment in the United States said that we put a very big impact in the choosing the audience in the United States, and when we see that Donald Trump became a president, it was like the Russian impact in this case. And it was rather interesting to analyze the digital policy and digital campaign President Trump and how Russia make impact in this process. We can't say 100% that we do it, yeah, but my point is that right now new media make a very big impact in different kind of political cases. Knowing and understanding exact audience, we can make an impact in the internal policy of the country, and also we can, knowing it, resolve different problems, and understanding it, we should control and manage it very well, and use new kind of analytics. I mean, data science analytics, because right now the increasing risks of using information also a lot of, and it's very important to understand how can we make an impact of this variety of information. So it's like brief points of my presentation, because it's very difficult to set it in 1 minute, but I try. Thank you.
Olga, thank you very much. That was a very well done in this difficult circumstances, and we got the main points. So thank you very much. I would like to thank all the participants, all the speakers, and especially our guest expert, Tatiana Lanshin. I don't know if she's still on, but her presentation was extremely useful to give a great perspective. All the presentations helped us to see the big picture, and they were like pieces of the puzzle, showing us how many factors and how many issues are affecting the international relations nowadays. But definitely it's clear that only comprehensive approach could work, and we should tap on new technologies, on cooperation modalities, and on adaptive management approaches to tackle all these issues, to make sure that we do not fail and we manage to get out of this crisis and all other disaster situations that the humanity is facing. So that said, we still hope that the future is bright, and we'll do our best to contribute to this. I thank you again all, and apologize if we didn't allow some time for discussion, and but hope that would not be the last conversation. So best of luck, and please join the session with Professor Mao and other experts, which is already on. So I wish you all success. Thank you very much. Thank you and bye.